I want you to watch this video. Actually, this video is quite interesting. I still remember last year when I want to prepare a slide notes for a lecture on this topic, the poverty reduction strategy. This documentary or short documentary just came out on YouTube. So your senior watch this very fresh of documentary during that time, and this year the government have took the initiative to revise the poverty line indicator, the PLI. So watch the video and then we can know the ideas, okay, about the poverty in Malaysia and how they calculate the poverty line indicator, the PLI in Malaysia. This is very interesting and enjoy watching this video.
Of them was poor. Today, statistics show 50 years ago, out of every 2 Malaysians, one of them was poor. Today, statistics show that just 0.4% of the population are living in poverty. That's closer to 1 person out of every 200. But the US Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights recently said that this figure is not accurate, that the number is actually between 16 to 20%, and that the government's figures are a statistical sleight of hand. So, what's the truth about Malaysian poverty? Essentially, the argument here is about how Malaysia measures poverty or who Malaysia categorizes as poor. According to the Malaysian government, households earning below 980 ringgit in Peninsular, 1,020 for Sarawak and 1,180 for Sabah are considered absolute poor. That's per household, not individual income. This income threshold is called the poverty line income or PLI. So that's Malaysia's perspective. In a household of 4 people, that amounts to around 8 ringgit per person per day, which makes it similar to the World Bank's threshold for extreme poverty of $190 per day. But the UN Special Rapporteur who paid Malaysia a visit in August 2019 doesn't think this is accurate. According to his report, this is a tragically low line for a country on the cusp of attaining high income status, especially since a range of rigorous independent analysis has suggested a more realistic poverty rate of 16 to 20%. Our government, well, agreed to disagree. However, there is a lot of research that agrees with the Special Rapporteur's criticisms. The World Bank categorizes Malaysia as an upper middle income country, which would raise its official poverty line amount to $550 per day. Dr. Martin Rebellion, an economist and former director of research at World Bank, even argued that the amount should be as high at $12, saying the $190 line is deliberately low, being anchored to poverty lines found in the poorest countries, and that the $12 threshold would be more comparable to other countries with a similar average income as Malaysia. This might start to sound like a really arbitrary argument. You say poor, I say not that poor, but measuring poverty is actually very important because it helps governments target welfare programs to those who really need them.
Since independence, the government has focused a lot of attention through systematic development planning to reduce poverty. So I think it is within that context that we see that the measurements and the way they did it is still pitched to the 1957, 60s, 70s measurement framework that could be seen as why the figures tend to be a bit low. One needs to change the measurement of poverty according to the state of development in the country.
This is the concept of relative poverty, where poverty is measured relative to the society we live in. Countries with a higher economy usually have a higher cost of living. Therefore, the poverty threshold should also rise to reflect this. The Khazanah Research Institute, in its research titled The State of Households, calculated relative poverty as households earning less than 60% of the median income. According to 2016 data, the threshold for relative poverty would then be a household income of 3,100 ringgit. So had Malaysia's welfare programs been solely targeted at the absolute poor households and neglected those in relative poverty, data would indicate otherwise. The Khazanah Research Institute's discussion paper titled Demarketing Households shows that since the mid-2000s, in the ninth Malaysia Plan, the government had already started its shifting policy by aiming to address inequality instead of eradicating poverty. This was further solidified in the 10th Malaysia Plan, with the government officially acknowledging a policy shift to cater to the bottom 40% of the population. Bottom 40% meaning the 40% with the lowest income. According to 2016 data, this would put any household earning 3,000 ringgit and below in the B40 territory. That's pretty similar to the relative poverty threshold we mentioned earlier. So, all good? Well, not really. While the income share of the B40 group has increased from 11.5% to 16.4% from 1970 to 2016, absolute inequality has actually widened. The Shared Prosperity Vision 2030, the government's spanking new roadmap, acknowledges this. It shows that income disparity between the P20 and B40 has grown from 1,935 ringgit in 1989 to 10,148 in 2016. Does this mean that our programs have been useless? Well, no. It's undeniable that Malaysia's economy has come a long way. But the problem may be with grouping all B40 households under one banner.
So one of the things in Malaysia is that you cannot continue to use blanket approaches to eradicate poverty because every single poverty group is different. So you need specific policies and programs. Even if you raise the poverty line, you're not going to resolve the poverty problem because you're only looking at one dimension. And the people that you're trying to capture in that one dimension will only be those who are income poor. They will not be those who are poor from all the other dimensions. The poor are not a homogeneous group. That I think is a very, very important factor to take into account. The poor are different. The causes of their poverty are different. The manifestations of their poverty are different.
Here's a quick illustration of what the professor said. A family earning 1,500 ringgit lives in KL, where schools and hospitals are pretty close and easy to get to. Another family earns slightly more but lives far away from healthcare facilities and schools. If we see poverty more holistically, we can see that the second family is definitely in a more challenging situation. And there are other factors to consider, like access to clean water, healthy food, or even job opportunities. So poverty should not be defined solely by income. Moving forward, our programs might be more effective if we unpack this B40 group and try to address more specific challenges. Someone living in the city earning 2,500 ringgit may need a microcredit scheme to push them out of relative poverty, while someone living in a rural area earning 3,000 ringgit may need better access to healthcare to improve the quality of their life. Also, since 2016, the government has started using the Multidimensional Poverty Index or MPI. This method of measuring poverty is more comprehensive and acknowledges that poverty is not just a matter of income. In the midterm review of the 11th Malaysia Plan, a breakdown of the MPI was shown, taking into account limited access to education, distance to a healthcare facility, and the standard of living based on things like the number of bedrooms in your house to the condition of toilets. In 2016, Malaysia's poverty rate according to the MPI was 0.86% of households. But this was also criticized for having low benchmarks. Malaysia ran a comparison between our benchmarks and standards set by the World Bank that had higher standards for education and income. It was found that if adjusted to the World Bank standards, our MPI poverty rate would be at 19.2% in 2016. The good news? The government is listening. Tun Mahathir has announced that the poverty line is in the process of being reviewed. Beyond that, the SPV 2030 aims to provide a decent standard of living to all Malaysians, and it has its sights set on achieving income equality. And in Budget 2020, the government aims to launch a number of projects that will address the same problems, from raising the minimum wage to pushing for providing access to water and electricity to rural parts of Sabah and Sarawak. So there are plenty of good signs. At the very least, hey, we now have a vision of an equitable Malaysia, but it remains to be seen if the measures announced to help us get to that vision are informed by current evidence-based research.
Very interesting, right? So here, actually, what I can say is that there are many issues here. Number one, we use a very old methodology to measure the PLI, which is 980 ringgit was used from back to 1970s until 2016. That's number one. That's why when I talk about there is a reduction in terms of the number or prevalence of poverty in Malaysia, I say like wow, so you look at very wonder why how Malaysian can provide such of a good facilities and also a good wealth for Malaysian people until our poverty prevalence of poverty just 0.6%, and that's why they claim that we have the lowest of prevalence of poverty in Asian Pacific region. That's number one. Number two is that they ask us to revise back because of the reasons. We are the upper middle country. Okay, Malaysia is categorized as upper middle income country. But then when we use 9 ringgit and 80 cents, why 9 ringgit 80 cents? Because of the World Bank saying that or define that $1.9 is considered as a PLI. Okay, but then that $1.9 is for the lower income countries. But Malaysia is not lower income countries. Therefore, we cannot use the same term as the World Bank recognize the countries. Okay, it's a 1.98 $1.9 okay, that's number two. The third part is that again they said that about the multi-dimensional measurement poverty just now. It's not solely about the income, but we have to look at in terms other necessities, other facilities like school facilities, access to school, access to public transport, and etc. So the government don't just look into the income itself, but try to look at other dimension, not just the income dimension. But the good part is that this year, around July 2020, Malaysia has announced that we have a new poverty line income for Malaysians, no more 980 ringgit. So that's the good part that we learn actually when the rapporteur come to Malaysia and then give commented. So actually it's not 0.6% after they use the new measurement. The prevalence of poverty actually is a very high in Malaysia, uh, and we don't use that 9 ringgit and 80 cents anymore. We use in the card line about 2,000 something. I will show you after this. Okay. So basically you understand what is the PLI and the reasons why we need to revise our PLI, and why you the reasons we cannot see only one dimensions but look at into other multiple dimensions. And it's very important actually if you want to conduct a program, a poverty reduction strategies, we have to look at the situations of the community. We have to observe that maybe if the program is you conduct in the urban area, maybe in terms of the approach is different if you want to take the target for the same things but in a rural area. So it's different between community, different between the states. And just now they mentioned that the situations with the same income for people in Kuala Lumpur and or I compare lah the same thing that people okay stay in Kuala Lumpur and stay in Terengganu might be different, because you know that staying in Kuala Lumpur they have highways, you have to pay for the toll and etc. But in Kuala Terengganu they have toll, they have no toll, and it's very easy access to facilities okay compared to other places. So we have to consider that when we want to plan a program or a strategy to reduce the poverty. And then kita akan tengok lah lepas ni okay ada things lah
You need to get a degree, then you can buy a
sorry okay, actually there are a lot of things that you can watch from this new flash. It's very very interesting.